As the police knocked on her door for the first time in 15 years, Anna realized this was her only chance to break free. But what the officers didn't know was that she wasn't just escaping. She was planning the ultimate revenge that would lock her abuser away forever. The sky, heavy with clouds, seems to reflect the weight of Anna's life. She stands by the barred window of a large, decaying house that was once her dream home. Now, it is nothing more than a gilded prison. From this window, she can see the world moving on without her. Children laughing as they play, neighbors gossiping over their fences, and cars passing by, filled with people who have no idea of the horrors hidden within this house. Anna's eyes follow the movement outside, but her mind drifts to a time when she was part of that world. She remembers being 18, a bright-eyed girl full of dreams. She wasn't rich, but she was content, surrounded by a close-knit group of friends. In those days, the future seemed wide open, full of possibilities. It was during her senior year of high school that she met David, a young man with a magnetic personality, someone everyone seemed drawn to. He was tall, handsome, and had an air of confidence that made him the center of attention wherever he went. They had been introduced by a mutual friend at a school dance. David, then a senior, had caught Anna's eye across the gymnasium. At first glance, he was everything she imagined her perfect man would be. Confident, charming, with a mischievous smile that made her feel butterflies in her stomach. That night, they danced until their feet were sore, and by the end of the evening, Anna was sure she had found the man she was meant to be with. For the next 5 years, they dated, and Anna fell deeper in love with him. David had a temper. Yes, but back then, his anger was fleeting, almost theatrical. He would yell at someone for cutting him off in traffic or curse when things didn't go his way, but he never turned his temper on her. In fact, David always made Anna feel special. He would bring her flowers, plan elaborate dates, and surprise her with small gifts. Her friends, however, noticed the red flags. They pointed out how he would dismiss Anna's opinions or subtly control where they went and who they saw, but Anna was too blinded by love to notice. The wedding came soon after David proposed during a weekend getaway at a beach house. The waves crashing against the shore as he knelt on one knee seemed like a scene straight out of a movie. Anna was overcome with emotion, tears filling her eyes as she said yes. She believed that all their small disagreements, his occasional fits of temper, and the strange possessiveness he showed were just bumps in the road that love would smooth over. She was wrong. It wasn't long after their marriage that David's temper grew into something more sinister. At first, it was little things. He would criticize the way Anna dressed or the food she cooked. "Can't you do anything right?" He would sneer after she spent hours preparing dinner. His anger was no longer just loud. It was venomous, designed to make her feel small, worthless. But the true terror began one night, 2 years into their marriage, when David returned home from work in a foul mood. He had been drinking, his eyes glassy with a mix of alcohol and rage. Anna had greeted him at the door with a smile, but it quickly faded as he stormed past her, muttering something under his breath. That night, for the first time, he hit her. The blow came out of nowhere, a backhand slap that sent Anna crashing to the ground. She was too stunned to scream, too shocked to process what had just happened. David stood over her, his chest heaving, eyes wild with fury. "Look what you made me do," he growled before walking away, leaving Anna on the cold, tile floor of their kitchen, her cheeks stinging and her heart breaking. In the days that followed, David was apologetic, showering her with gifts and affection. "I didn't mean it," he said, holding her tightly. "I love you, Anna. You know that, don't you?" He was gentle and kind again, just like he used to be. Anna, confused and desperate to believe that the man she loved was still in there somewhere, forgave him, but the cycle had begun. David's fits of rage became more frequent, more violent. He started controlling every aspect of Anna's life. At first, It was just her clothes, then her friends, and finally, even her family. He forbade her from seeing them, claiming they were trying to poison her mind against him. Anna's world grew smaller and smaller until the only person she interacted with was David. He took away her phone, cut off the internet, and ensured she had no means of contacting anyone outside of the house. Anna became a prisoner, trapped in a gilded cage of domesticity. From the outside, their life seemed perfect. David was a successful businessman. They lived in a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood, and they were financially stable. But inside, Anna was living a nightmare. David's obsession with control reached new heights as he became consumed with violent media. He would spend hours watching the news, fixating on stories of domestic violence, murder, and chaos. He seemed to relish the suffering of others, often making offhand comments about how some women just asked for it. The news became his ritual, a constant background noise in their home, amplifying his paranoia and feeding his anger. Whenever David was stressed from work or upset by something he saw on the news, he would take it out on Anna. She became his punching bag, both physically and emotionally. There were days when he would lock her in their bedroom for hours, denying her food or water, simply to remind her of his power. Other times, he would fly into a rage and douse her with scalding hot water from the stove, watching with cold eyes as she screamed in pain. Anna tried to escape multiple times. The first attempt came after a particularly brutal beating. She had managed to slip out of the house while David was at work, running barefoot through the streets to a neighbor's house. But when she arrived, desperate and shaking, she found no help. Her neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Jensen, had a similar bruise peeking out from under her sleeve. She simply looked at Anna with sad eyes and said, "There's no escaping men like them, dear. Best just to endure it." Anna was devastated. If even her neighbors were trapped, where could she possibly go? Her second attempt was more carefully planned. She waited until David went on a business trip, using the few hours she had alone to pack a small bag and leave the house. But when she tried to contact her family, she found her phone had no signal. David had cut off every possible means of communication, leaving her stranded. The years passed, each one blending into the next in a blur of pain and fear. Anna's spirit was slowly eroded, her hope extinguished with every failed escape. She was isolated, trapped in a house with a man who enjoyed watching her suffer. 15 years had passed, but for Anna, it felt like an eternity. She had aged far beyond her years, her once youthful face now lined with worry and exhaustion. Every day was the same, a slow, torturous march through her own personal hell. She had learned to tiptoe around David's moods, to anticipate his outbursts before they happened. But no matter how careful she was, the beatings never stopped. David had completely isolated Anna from the outside world. The only time she saw anyone was when they came to the door for deliveries or maintenance. But even those brief encounters were heavily monitored by David, who always kept a close watch on her interactions. It was during one of these rare moments of contact that Anna met Tom, a delivery man in his late 30s with a kind face and gentle demeanor. Tom was different from the other men who came to their door. He noticed the bruises on Anna's arms and the haunted look in her eyes. Over time, they developed a silent understanding. When David wasn't looking, Tom would slip her small notes of encouragement, telling her to hold on, that there was still hope. Their exchanges became the only light in Anna's otherwise dark world. Every time Tom came by, her heart raced with the possibility that he might be the one to save her. Eventually, their connection grew deeper. One afternoon, when David was away on a business trip, Tom stayed a little longer than usual. In the safety of the empty house, they talked for hours, sharing their fears, dreams, and hopes. For the first time in years, Anna felt alive. She felt seen, not as a victim, but as a person with her own desires and needs. Tom confessed his feelings for her, And in that moment, Anna allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years: love. They kissed, their connection electrifying. For a brief time, Anna believed she could escape with Tom, that he could offer her the life she had been denied for so long. Tom pleaded with her to run away with him. But Anna, consumed by fear and guilt, hesitated. She knew the risks. David was powerful, connected, and ruthless. If he ever found out, he would kill them both. Their affair, however, was short-lived. One day, Tom stopped showing up. His absence left a gaping hole in Anna's heart. She feared the worst, that David had found out and had done something to him. But she never found out what really happened to Tom. Whether he left out of fear or was harmed, Anna would never know. His disappearance was a bitter reminder that escape was a fantasy. Anna's brief taste of freedom through Tom was gone, and in its place, an even darker reality settled in. She was utterly alone once again, left with nothing but the memories of those stolen moments of affection and a heart broken by both her impossible situation and her own paralyzing fear. As much as she had longed to believe in the possibility of escape, Tom's disappearance confirmed what she had known deep down all along. There was no way out. David became even more controlling after Tom vanished. Whether he had sensed something between Anna and the delivery man, or whether his paranoia simply grew over time, Anna didn't know. But David's behavior became more obsessive. He installed more locks on the doors and windows, set up cameras around the house, and even began making surprise visits home from work. There was no escape, not even in her thoughts. David's presence, though physical, seemed to have burrowed deep into her mind, making her feel as though he was always watching, always waiting for her to make a mistake. The beatings became more brutal and frequent. Anna's body was covered in bruises, her skin scarred from years of abuse. David no longer bothered to apologize or make excuses. He saw her as nothing more than an object, a vessel for his rage. When he wasn't hurting her physically, he was torturing her emotionally, belittling her intelligence, questioning her worth as a woman, and eroding any last shred of self-esteem she had left. But worse than the physical and emotional torment was the mental prison David had built around her. He had stripped her of everything that made her human, her agency, her dignity, her hope. He told her that she was nothing without him, that the world didn't care about her, and that no one would believe her if she ever tried to seek help. And after so many years of hearing those words, Anna began to believe them. One night, during a particularly vicious argument, David attacked Anna with more fury than usual. She had burned his dinner, an offense that in his twisted mind was unforgivable. He threw her against the kitchen counter, sending plates crashing to the floor, then grabbed a pot of boiling water from the stove. Anna screamed, but her cries only seemed to fuel David's rage. He tipped the pot over, scalding her with the boiling water. The pain was excruciating, searing her skin, but worse than the physical agony was the realization that she could die here, like this, in this house of horrors, at the hands of the man she had once loved. After David passed out drunk later that night, Anna dragged herself to the bathroom and stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her once beautiful face was swollen and bruised, her skin red and blistered from the boiling water. She looked like a ghost, a hollow version of the vibrant girl she had been so many years ago. It was in that moment that something inside Anna snapped. The pain, the fear, the hopelessness, they all coalesced into something sharper, colder: resolve. She couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't live another day like this. But how could she escape? Every time she had tried before, David had stopped her. He had cut off all means of communication, manipulated their neighbors into thinking she was either crazy or exaggerating, and isolated her from the world. Yet Anna knew she had to try again. This time, however, she wouldn't just run. She would make sure David paid for what he had done to her, permanently. Weeks passed as Anna silently planned her revenge. She knew that trying to flee while David was still powerful would be a mistake. He would track her down, and the punishment for attempting to leave him again would be worse than anything she had endured before. No, she needed to find a way to ensure that he would never be able to hurt her or anyone else again. Then came the moment she had been waiting for. Late one evening, David came home drunk, his rage boiling over after a dispute with one of his business associates. He had gotten into a violent altercation at a bar, beating a man half to death in front of a crowd of witnesses. The police had been called, but David had left before they arrived. He stumbled into the house, bloody knuckles and alcohol on his breath, his eyes wild with fury. Anna braced herself for what was to come. As David raged around the house, smashing furniture and screaming obscenities, Anna heard a knock at the door. The sound startled her. It had been years since anyone had come to their home unannounced. Her heart raced as she heard David stagger toward the door, muttering threats under his breath. It was the police. They had tracked David down after his attack at the bar and had come to question him. As soon as Anna saw the officers standing in the doorway, something inside her clicked. This was her chance. Her heart pounded as she watched David attempt to talk his way out of trouble, his words slurring as he denied everything. But the officers weren't buying it. They asked to come inside, and David, in his arrogance, allowed them in. As they entered, the officers' eyes flickered to Anna. One of them, a younger man with kind eyes, seemed to notice the bruises on her arms, the burns on her neck. His expression darkened as he put the pieces together. "Ma'am," he said softly, "are you all right?" Anna's heart leaped into her throat. She had been waiting for this moment for 15 long years. But now that it was here, she was terrified. If she said the wrong thing, if David realized what she was about to do, he could kill her before the officers could react. But something inside her urged her to speak, to finally tell the truth. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm not." The words spilled out of Anna like a dam breaking, all the years of abuse and torment flooding into the open. She told the officers everything. How David had trapped her in the house, how he had beaten and tortured her for years, how he had isolated her from the outside world. She showed them the bruises, the burns, the scars. Tears streamed down her face as she finally let go of the secret she had been forced to keep for so long. The officers looked horrified. They immediately placed David under arrest, handcuffing him as he screamed obscenities at Anna, calling her a liar, a manipulative whore. But it didn't matter anymore. David's power over her had finally been broken. As they let David out of the house, Anna collapsed to the floor, sobbing. It was over. After 15 years of living in hell, she was finally free. But freedom wasn't enough. Not for what he had done to her. Not for the life he had stolen. Anna wasn't just going to survive. She was going to make sure that David paid for every single bruise, every scar, every moment of terror he had inflicted on her. The trial for David's assault on the man at the bar was fast-tracked, and within weeks, he was facing charges. But Anna knew that if his only crime was what had happened at the bar, he would eventually walk free. She couldn't allow that, not after everything he had done to her. So, while David sat in jail, awaiting his trial, Anna began to build her case. Her first step was to gather evidence. She went through every room in the house, documenting the years of abuse. She took photos of the bruises and scars that still marred her skin, along with the broken furniture and bloodstains that littered their home. She found receipts for the surveillance equipment David had installed, the locks he had put on the doors and windows, and the cell phone bills showing how he had cut off all her communication. But that wasn't enough. Anna knew she needed more than just her word against David's. She needed to expose the full extent of his depravity. As Anna dug deeper into David's past, she uncovered more than she had ever imagined. He had been involved in illegal activities for years, fraud, embezzlement, and even ties to organized crime. There were rumors of a mysterious disappearance connected to one of his business rivals, a man who had simply vanished one night after crossing David. Anna took everything she found to the police, making sure they knew that David wasn't just a violent man. He was a dangerous criminal. She worked tirelessly, meeting with detectives, providing them with every shred of evidence she could find, determined to ensure that David would never leave prison. The trial was a media sensation. David, once a respected businessman, was now exposed as a monster. Anna sat in the courtroom every day, listening as the prosecution laid out the years of abuse, the illegal activities, and the violent altercation that had finally led to his arrest. When Anna took the stand, her testimony was devastating. She recounted the years of torment in harrowing detail, her voice steady as she described the beatings, the isolation, the burns. The jury was visibly shaken. David, sitting at the defense table, glared at her with pure hatred, but Anna no longer felt fear. He couldn't touch her anymore. The verdict was swift, guilty on all charges. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, Anna walked out of the courtroom, free for the first time in 15 years. The sun shone brightly as she stepped onto the street, the weight of her past finally lifting from her shoulders. She had not only survived, she had won. But as she stood there, breathing in the fresh air, a question lingered in her mind. What now? For so long, her life had been defined by fear and survival. Now that David was gone, what would she do with her newfound freedom? As she walked away from the courthouse, Anna realized that her journey wasn't over. She had spent years locked in a prison of David's making, but now she had the chance to rebuild her life, to rediscover who she was before the abuse, before the fear. And as for David, he would spend the rest of his life behind bars, trapped in a prison of his own making, just like he had trapped her. Only this time, it was Anna who held the key. The silent prisoner had finally won her freedom.